evening, good morning to everyone connected over LinkedIn, YouTube, or whatever platform you connect to. It's my first time I'm leading this UT. It's number 48, so I was watching UT even before I joined Solo. It's a pretty it's a place where we can discuss technical things, we can discuss topics, we can discuss whatever is tangential to open source, service mesh, and in general, like the cloud native tools and tech that we all love and cherish. And of course, this is the UT before KubeCon, so we're all very excited. We're all working on our presentations, on panel. We're all very eager to see KubeCon in Amsterdam. Of all the places, let me introduce myself quickly. I'm Alessandro. I live in Amsterdam, and I was really waiting for KubeCon to come back to Amsterdam. And if you come to KubeCon, please stop by our booth. I think it's the number G9, solo.io booth. Come talk to us about service mesh, about GitOps. Come meet the team. Acuity also has a booth, I suppose, I guess, and Nicholas will tell you which number is it. We also have an application networking day the day before KubeCon, so it's a great time to be alive and doing cloud native, and a great time to visit Amsterdam. Today is a sunny day in Amsterdam. I hope it's gonna stay for a little while. And so if you don't have, maybe you don't bring your umbrella, just bring your parasol and your good attitude to Amsterdam. So without further ado, again, I'm Alessandro, platform advocate at solo.io. I joined a few months ago, and I really like this community of practice, community of engineers at Solo, including Alex. Been admiring his work on GitOps, and of course also Nicholas. I've been looking at his live streams and blogs and all the dissemination of this GitOps culture that is promoting. So we choose this topic today about the intersection between GitOps and service mesh because we haven't covered it yet. We usually do quite the technical walkthrough doing UTs, but this time I would like more to, well, let's see what comes out of it, right? So we have this topic and we have these two great tools, service mesh and GitOps, and see what we can do by combining together. So talk too much. If you guys want to introduce yourself, Alex, perhaps first in alphabetical order.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Alex Lee. I am a field engineer here at Solo. I've been here for almost 2 years now. And prior to that, I was a OpenShift container solutions architect at Red Hat. Yeah, nice to meet everyone. I got really into Argo CD when Red Hat adopted it into the platform, and really kind of hasn't stopped from there, right? Just been everything I do is with Argo CD, and I love the technology. It opens up a lot of ease of use and user experience that I think is really necessary if we're going to scale the use of Kubernetes in the ecosystem.
Thank you. Nicholas?
Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Nicholas Mori. I'm a developer advocate at Acuity, which is the company created by the founders of the Argo project. I used to be your average platform engineer that was just using Argo, and then I got kind of convinced to go into a full-time role just talking about and playing with Argo and making content around it because I love the technical side of it a lot, but I also like teaching people about it and getting them introduced to the technology and learning how to use it, because I remember the first time I had to figure out what GitOps was and like how it benefits me and why I would go through the effort. And now I can't stop talking about it. So I'm really glad to be here on this hoot to get a chance to talk about GitOps and maybe convince some more people to come over to the GitOps way of life.
But this gives me an idea for the very first question. So can you talk about your first time you had to fight or, use GitOps because somebody told you to, or just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I was introduced to GitOps and Argo CD when I joined a company that already had it implemented. So I was used to like the role before that. I was implementing Kubernetes into like a really corporate environment, think like insurance. So it was a lot of regulation, a lot of like you had to care about every little detail. And then I moved into a role where I got to use Argo CD and GitOps to make my changes to Kubernetes. And it was so fascinating. The first time I went and I created a pull request and I said, I want to change this about the state of the cluster. And I had to justify like why and describe exactly what is changing based on the desired state in Git. And I think that's when it clicked for me that I'm like, oh, so this makes it really clear what changed and why it changed. And like, there's a process around changing that desired state instead of it being, somebody has kubectl apply access to the cluster and they're just, when their Helm chart has a new change, they just apply it or something like that.
Yeah, I connect to that. It's like, is this eureka moment, haha, like it's this. I think I remember a few of these moments, right? So when I figured out finally what an ingress was, right? So when I figured out persistent volumes in Kubernetes, or when I discover Argo CD and GitOps, and when I discover Service Mesh, when I really realized, whoa, this thing is really powerful, and I really need to learn this thing. So these are these few months. It really what makes our job interesting. Like every once in a while, there's something so cool that is so compelling to learn, right? So and GitOps and Argo CD is definitely one of those.
For sure. Like I think what's fun for me to talk about with GitOps is like, what did you do before GitOps? What was your process for changing the state of the cluster?
I can definitely answer that one. That was going right through my mind. My use case is a little bit different. So I've always been in kind of field engineering and sales engineering in my roles, helping customers implement Kubernetes and implement this technology. And in that process, what I was finding myself doing was I was basically creating a whole ton of glue scripts in Bash, right? And every day, you would do one of two things. You would either keep a long-standing cluster up and running 24/7, which would cost you money just for kind of dev purposes and showcasing features and doing demos and stuff like that. Or secondly, you would write a whole bunch of glue scripts that you would crush that cluster, treat it like cattle, not pets, right? You would destroy that cluster every day, spin it back up, and hope that that glue script worked, and that somebody upstream didn't change something, or some update didn't break something, or even like some issue with your local machine running that script and missing some little minor piece, right? And what I found, I was actually spending a lot more time building up my my demo cluster, my test cluster, rather than actually validating the features that I was trying to showcase to my customers, right? So that's where I discovered Argo CD as a tool there, and I was like, wow, if I have every single one of my configurations stored in Git, and I just pull that down, it really makes my my day so much easier, to the point where it was like, you want a demo? Okay, I can spin up a cluster in less than 5 minutes. It's going to be bootstrapped with GitOps and Argo CD, and it will be the same exact thing every single time, with high reliability, right? So instead of kind of sitting there, watching my little glue script and hoping that everything comes out good, I would actually be able to push a button, go grab a coffee, come back, and have a fully working test environment ready to go.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
So I was very lucky to be at Microsoft in this golden age when they were really starting doing containers, and there was like, yes, of course, and there were like immense Azure DevOps pipelines, and it was even before GitHub Action, mind you, right? So it was a very, very, very long sequence of jobs and steps, applying very carefully everything from Ingress, Cert Manager. I had a beautiful, for me it was very, because I wrote it, but it was a very prescriptive kind of imperative way to create a cluster and bring it to a state where you could use it. So yeah, I think maybe the scripts are still somewhere. Maybe I should convert them in applications, of course. But yeah, it's already few years old, this thing, right? So the GitOps is just it's not just something very new. There is a working group. It's part of the. I mean, there are conferences around it. It's not just a fad, right? It's not something that goes away. It's actually probably reaching the peak of adoption, right? Or becoming more mainstream. So can you tell me a bit about Acuity? I mean, I know that I've been following it for a while. I know that you get like a very cool SaaS control plane for, and you just announced something very cool, which is like a hosted control plane for Argo CD for on-premise.
Yeah. Like Acuity's mission is really to continue supporting the open source project, but creating, kind of an offering that allows you to take advantage of everything you already know from Argo CD, but focus on using Argo CD instead of managing it itself. And so like right now there's the Acuity platform, which is the SaaS offering for Argo CD, except for it's kind of a re-architecture. So it's more of an agent-based model where, instead of your Argo CD server, like if you think of the hub and spoke model where you've got a management cluster, Argo CD is running in that, and it's connecting directly out to each of the clusters, and you have to have that, each of the connected clusters exposed to the management one. The Acuity platform kind of changes the architecture, so you're deploying an agent into each of the connected clusters, and then that connects back to the platform. And it has a number of reliability improvements because of that, and you can scale a single Argo CD instance much more than you can from the open source model. And we're trying to, like, that agent model allows us to introduce some cool features like state replication. So it's something that we just released on the platform where if the Acuity platform were to like disappear or like go down or whatever, the agents in each cluster can still manage the state of that cluster, even though they were deployed out from a central Argo CD instance that's now gone away. So it's kind of improvements like that we're trying to make with the Acuity platform, while still fully supporting the open source, contributing back to upstream. And like in the last release, I think it was like six of our team members had contributed to that release in one way or another. So it feels really good to still be closely connected to the open source project.
I do find so striking the similarities between Solo and Acuity, because we also an open core. I mean, we contribute factually to the Istio project. That's our roots, right? So it's a thing, right? I've been doing open source since I was a kid, and I still do it. So that must be something about doing open source, and that's why we joined this conference. That's why we are here, because we're doing what we do. It's because we believe in the value of open development, right? So an open model for developing software in the open, right? So
exactly.
Cool. Well, Alex, what's your let's bring also the service mesh in the mix, right? So we could talk about Argo because we love it, but of course, okay, the other thing that and the whole point of this meeting was to talk about how service mesh can also interact with GitOps ideas and mentality, right? So how to because I think you are adopting GitOps for a reason, which is automation, single source of truth, and service mesh also brings you in the same space where you can automate, for example, traffic shaping between services. You can automate zero trust security. I see it as complementary, but I would like to know Alex's opinions for now, and then also Nicholas, of course.
Yeah, I mean, so GitOps is a mechanism by which you deploy applications onto your Kubernetes cluster, right? So I kind of see where service mesh is the same way, right? It's just an application that runs on top of Kubernetes, and therefore I can take and pick it up and put it inside inside my Kubernetes cluster through GitOps procedures, right? So that's at least the platform of Istio or Glue platform. deploying that using GitOps is our key model here at Solo. No ClickOps, none of that, right? We want everything declarative, because what's the point of running on Kubernetes otherwise? We don't have much of everything in declarative, and anybody else can change anything. And, this doesn't work in a multi-tenant world, right? So when I kind of got here to Solo, that was the first thing that was part of my charter was, we need to make sure that GitOps is the model to deploy a service mesh and to deploy the platform, right? Glue platform, and the controller that manages service mesh. Aside from that, I think GitOps principles really follow along with the same way that you would configure an application running in your service mesh through GitOps, breaking your application into your app folder, app directory, and then separating the config out from that. Again, allows you to really start to treat your applications and even the entire cluster as, we have a concept when we start moving into multi-cluster, right? So we have the same management plane model where you have a centralized place that Glue Mesh management controller is running. And then it is managing workloads that are running inside Istio, inside what we call workload clusters, hub and spoke model, right? And if I can break apart my applications and my config to where my config, so such as the virtual services, the route tables, all of my security policies actually live and are managed in a centralized management cluster, and then those configs are propagated to my applications as they go live, or are deployed. What I'm able to do now is to truly treat my workload clusters as cattle, like I mentioned, right? So all that is deployed on that workload cluster is a Glue Mesh agent, Istio, and the application itself. And if that entire cluster goes away and is brought back up, it automatically bootstraps itself to the mesh. It automatically gets those configs synced from both the marriage of GitOps as the source of truth, but also the Solo controller, watching that source of truth and making sure that the state is what is defined in Git. So really, that's kind of where the intersection of GitOps and service mesh is for me. Is it's just another component that you can bootstrap on that can provide you really, really advanced capabilities for traffic shaping, routing, policy handling, and then the GitOps just as a layer over that to keep that in sync.
That's definitely it's also actually this might talk at KubeCon is about ephemeral clusters, right? So that's it's an interesting place where we are all going, right? So of course, like not everybody's going there at the same speed. Been working with customers still, like having the same cluster for months and years, but then it's clear that as I see this as an evolution of DevOps, right? So first VMs were treated as kettles, and now entire clusters are just things that come and go. I'm actually using in my presentation, I'm using the GRU and Minion nomenclature because, of course, kettles are. We also love kettles, and some of us are vegan, so I don't want to hurt any sensitivity, but interesting. What I find interesting, again, like a very similar approach, right? So because also Argo, you say that also now you're developing this Argo CD agent, and we have this Glue agent running on these workload clusters. It's an interesting thing that's a model that works better than just the the central management that contains all the kube configs of everything, and then impose things or manage clusters from there. Can you comment on that? I don't know if you were involved in the choices.
Yeah, we typically, like, we found that when you have like that central Argo CD instance, the more clusters you add, the more you have to scale the components that are in that management cluster. And scaling those individual components, like the application controller, sharding that out, scaling the repo server and the API server, it frankly, it sucks, to put it plainly. Like, it's not the best experience. It's a very like technical tweaking of like environment variables on the workloads, and it's just not a pleasant experience, honestly. Where like we found with the agent-based model, it's the processing relevant to that connected cluster stays in that cluster. So as you add more and more clusters, you're just using a little bit of the resources from that one to manage that, and you don't have to worry about scaling out the centralized management cluster. So it really simplifies that process. And just to comment on something Alex said earlier, like I find that basically everyone I talk to, if the tool doesn't support GitOps, they're not interested in using it. Like it's kind of a prerequisite now, is that if you want to sell a Kubernetes service or build a tool on top of it, you want to be able to support that declarative management, and you need to make sure all your configurations are represented as resources in the cluster, and then that should automatically integrate with whatever GitOps tooling you want to use.
CRD is king. If there's you gotta do something, you gotta have a CRD for today nowadays, right? So if you don't have a CRD, what are you doing? You know, and of course we're also moving into more standardization. We embracing also gateway API to define these things in clusters, like virtual destinations or ingresses. So that's very interesting. It's also one advantage of the agent mode. I also find it quite important for enterprise use cases, that you don't need to punch any hole in a firewall so a central cluster can manage another cluster. It's only upstream communication, right? So it's the agent opening a connection to the master and uploading and receiving commands. So that's seems like a minor feature, but I think it's pretty crucial for many enterprise customers. So
I mean, it's probably an age-old question to you, Nick, when customers ask you, should I run a centralized control plane or a Argo CD in each cluster? I'd actually say that I personally, to reduce blast radius and all that other stuff, not poke security holes, generally deploy Argo CD per cluster, just to kind of keep it simple for me. I know that there's a whole ton of blogs about that, which one, which way. So it's really cool to hear that Acuity's doing some, almost like hybrid approach where you get a little bit best of both worlds there. Some of that centralized management, maybe single pane of glass capabilities, but also, reducing that blast radius, reducing the security holes in the way as well, and probably scaling capabilities as well, because every cluster is probably a little bit different.
Yeah, one really interesting kind of nuance of switching to the agent-based model that we found is that it actually can save a lot on network traffic depending on your architecture, is because you're no longer streaming every single Kubernetes event back to this management cluster, which is if it's in a different region, like you could be spending $1,000 a month on bandwidth just to like get all of that information streamed back to your management cluster. Well, now that can stay within it, where you're likely in the same zone and you're not paying like transfer costs between the nodes or anything. So there's a multitude of reasons to go that way, and you get that like Argo CD per cluster feeling, except for with that single Argo CD UI, which if you do your app projects correctly, mean that you can get the same level of separation as individual instances, but in like one UI. So if you have a team that has access to all of the clusters, they can see it all in one Argo UI, and you don't have to manage like API keys for every instance and user on every instance and all of those integrations.
It's definitely it's the best of both worlds indeed, like control, but also seeing uniformity of deployment. We don't think of the cognitive load. I know that one Argo CD per cluster is pretty valid way to do it, but then I really have to check all cluster if Argo CD is running, and also upgrades are very complicated, right? So that's why we solve it also for our product Blue. We have this agent that just does the job of programming the local configuration for this. So it's pretty interesting model. But great. So how do you see the multi-cluster going? So indeed, like there's this way. So what actually also we love at solo.io, and I guess also at Acuity, is observability, right? So we really want, we think that service mesh is a big proponent, is a big help when you want to embrace really good observability of your clusters. And I see also Argo CD moving to that direction. So what do you do with observability? You do open telemetry, or how's the whole thing goes in Acuity?
Yeah, with open source directly, I'm pretty sure there is open telemetry support. There's like a flag or something that you have to run, and then there's also the standard metrics that you can pull out with like a Prometheus adapter. And then for Acuity, what's done on top of that is there's like built-in dashboards and audit logs for every change that happens within Argo CD. So like if an application is changed in some way, that gets reported back to the audit log and is made available at like the organization level, so you can see what's happening across all of your Argo CD instances, and you can filter that down into like a nice dashboard. And then we've built extensions so that not only can you see that in the Acuity dashboard for your Argo CD instance, you can see it in the Argo CD UI on each application. You can go and view the audit log of changes to that application in the Argo CD UI. So it's providing a level of visibility beyond what you can get by default in open source, because it the little things that, like, the interesting part with Argo CD is it supports both GitOps and GitOps anti-patterns. So if you want to make your changes outside of Git, you can, right? It depends on your organization's policies. And so the audit log kind of helps if that's how your organization is running. If you can't get all of your audit from changes in Git, you can then see it in the audit log for your Argo CD instance. And you get that kind of same level of reporting.
Interesting. Yeah, it's, of course, GitOps is a single source of truth, provided that everybody sticks to the rules and you have good enforcement of the rules. Otherwise, it's like what I do with my kids. I mean, you can set some rules, but if you don't enforce them, they're just moot, right? So they're just don't do it. It's so actually that's why, I mean, I think it's almost like a reflex. I put sync policy, auto heal, all this stuff are really part of every application definition, because otherwise it's not even GitOps, right? So if it doesn't auto heal, it's not really, you're not really doing GitOps, right? So it's kind of a automatic, it's almost like a reflex, right? So
yeah, I think that's why the fourth principle set out by the OpenGitOps project is handling that, where it says the only mechanism through which the system is intentionally operated on is through these principles. Like it's saying that, like, don't let your engineers have write access to your clusters anymore. Only only the Argo CD service account should really be the one with write access, unless you have, you're the SRE on call. But even then, like, you want everything to just be through Git, and you have to make it the easiest option, right? Because if it's easier for somebody to run kubectl from their developer workstation against production, they're more likely to do that than if they have to go through a whole process. So you want to make sure that your GitOps processes are really streamlined and reflect the needs of the users, and aren't just like a big bureaucracy battle of like, how do I get this approved and merged, right?
Yeah, this reminds me, there was a time where I was doing a lot of DevOps, of course, and there was this idea of tainting every virtual machine that you SSH into. You SSH into a virtual machine for debugging, great, but now that machine is marked for deletion, because you can't really tell what somebody does, so you may delete your own logs or bash history, and then so that machine will be wiped out after you've done your troubleshooting, of course. But yeah, that's a very extreme implementation of these principles, of course.
That's a cool pattern. Yeah, literally tainting it if anything is changed outside of the desired state.
You can't really tell anymore if it's really compliant. So the only the only way is to delete and recreate it. So that's the whole point.
Yeah, cool.
So Alex, let's close with you, because I feel like I didn't give you much space. I'm sorry, but what you working on now? What's your focus now?
Yeah, with respect to GitOps, I've been working on kind of methodologies for our organization and even some of our customers. Now I've tested this. We've been building what we call the app of apps catalog. So I pretty heavily use the app of apps pattern inside Argo CD. I think it's a pretty useful pattern within. And my kind of goal here was to be able to enable really anybody, even if they had no idea what a service mesh was or no idea what Istio or even Argo CD was, to be able to pull this repo down and deploy full-blown examples right out of the gate using Argo CD, using app of apps pattern to get your full cluster bootstrapped, for example, using K3D, Argo CD deployed on it, all of the glue mesh platform components deployed and registered, and then your applications and configs exposed all throughout one single line command. It's been working very well. I've seen this model really help to kind of avoid what I was mentioning at the beginning of this call, which is taking so much time to build your own kind of bespoke environment rather than just consuming it and testing and validating features on top, right? Don't try to kind of I had a couple talks that I was trying to submit to some places. Basically, dry your service mesh, right? Don't do things multiple times if you don't need to, unless you're particularly trying to say A/B test a feature or a parameter inside your core platform components. The idea of what I've been working on is here, I'm going to provide that to you out of the box so that you can start actually focusing on the value add, which is putting configurations, putting policies, and establishing policies, or observing your actual applications running on top of the platform, rather than spending all of those cycles actually building the platform itself.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's this concept of better is included but swappable, right? So because you can always change later on, and it's sort of it's the same idea of autopilot in JKE, and in AKS they're called guardrails. It's interesting, and then you wonder why JKE or AKS don't do this with GitOps, right? With Argo CD, just give me a repo that I can point my cluster to, and I know they're gonna be to a point that I can use them, right? So, but the big clouds, of course, they're a little behind in innovation, right? So you can't blame them, right? So they have to run massive organizations and massive departments, while we, like small companies like us, can innovate much faster, right? So
yeah, they innovate at scale, not necessarily at the edge.
They do this massive innovation. Instead we are leaner, faster, and I don't know if you follow. We're also innovating a lot in the service mesh area with ambient mesh, of course, with BPF. It's really a lot going on, and sometimes also it's almost difficult to catch on, to stay up to date. But we do our best. I would like to thank you so much. It's a short one because it was also very last minute, and I thank you folks for being here and listening to me and supporting me in this last minute out. The recording will be out. We'll put some comments also. Interesting, like the blog post we mentioned. Also, Alex has a demo of this this service mesh with all the Argo CD tooling attached. So we will probably leave some links in the comment. Feel free to add some more. So, and I will thank everybody for being here. And I think Chris will stop the live stream as soon as he reads this message. And thank you again. Have a nice Tuesday evening or afternoon, wherever you are, guys. I mean, where are you guys from?
I'm based out of San Francisco.
I'm based out of Toronto, Canada.
Oh, all right. Okay, that's Must be nice. Okay, well, I hope to see you in Amsterdam very soon. Thank you.
Yeah, Acuity will be there. We're booth SU1 if you want to stop by, and don't forget to go to ArgoCon on the 18th if you happen to get a ticket in time.
It's sold out, so it's a bit late
Yeah.
for that, but I'm definitely gonna be at ArgoCon. And there's also IstioCon, of course. I'll try to split myself into. Thank you again.
Thanks, Alessandro.